It looks like we are recording. So welcome everybody. And today is the 16th of December, small group today as we head into the holidays, but we have Josh Duplantis here with us from, and I probably mangled your last name, Josh, sorry, from Coastal Alabama. Is it Technical College?
Community College. Yeah.
Community College, there we go, sorry. Couple of quick things. We'll start off with our pledge and our invocation, and then a couple of housekeeping, and then Josh is going to tell us a little bit about what he does. So Bill, do you want to start us with the invocation?
Sure. Father, thank you for the opportunity for us to gather as like minds with like purpose to serve you and to serve others. I thank you, Lord, for the information that you've prepared for us tonight through Josh. I pray that we will catch hold of some of the things that he's doing and find ways to share that in our area. And I just pray, Lord, that you will keep our minds open and our hearts attentive so that you might speak to us in any way that you choose. So I pray that you'll bless Josh in his presentation, and I thank you for what you're going to do in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. If you everybody join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation, it's echoing, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Sorry about that. So one of the things I want to cover real quick, just as other members watch this, is I'd like everybody to be thinking about possibly changing our meetings to be the same every time we meet. I'm thinking Tuesdays might be the best option as opposed to constantly flipping back and forth between Tuesday and Thursday, and would like your input on that. And then also, hopefully everybody can join in on creating some stockings, buying some socks and underwear for some people who need it. Get some pictures of yourselves with your baskets that you put together and let me know where you would deliver them to so that we can put something together for that, log what we've done, and also show the district as well. So outside of that, Josh is here with us today. I'm gonna let him introduce himself, and then he's going to share his screen and talk a little bit about what he does and how he helps our communities. Thank you, Josh.
All right, thank you guys, and I'll go ahead and share. And let me just confirm that I got this up because I have an introductory slide. Let's see if we can get there. How's that?
We got it.
Got it. And are we playing from the start? Do we have it on the big screen?
Yes, we do.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. I was probably going to take it a little different direction as far as what we do, but I think what people have been interested in here, especially over the last 2 years with COVID, is this labor crisis that we're in. And I titled this, why COVID isn't the sole cause of this current labor shortage, and really have kind of found a lot of people interested on why is that? Why do we see this? And if it's not COVID, then what? And what should we expect, both from a labor market standpoint and from a workforce development standpoint? So just a little bit about me. I was telling you guys earlier, I grew up in the labor business down in South Louisiana, primarily in the oil field. So learned a lot about a lot of different occupations, welders, roustabouts, fitters. Even as a young age, I was kind of a welding shop rat that just kind of hung around the shop and would burn a rod anytime they would let me. And then, of course, naturally, kind of coming up in a technical space. After graduating college, I went out and spent the first 5 years of my career in manufacturing for Cargill, a large agribusiness firm. Went out west as a business manager for them at some of the production sites. Spent most of that time in Oklahoma City, some in Amarillo, Texas. And the last 15 years really have been back into higher education, specifically in the economic and workforce development, economic development spaces. Spent 9 years at the University of Southern Miss as their director of community engagement. Spent the first few years here. My wife grew up in South Alabama. We moved here as the executive director of our regional workforce council, which is a kind of small staff that is charged with creating kind of the workforce infrastructure for a region. And then about 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to come on to Coastal, and I'll talk in a second about kind of why I thought that was a good idea. And you'll hear some of that through the presentation. But educationally, a BS from LSU in human resource education workforce, a master's from Auburn in educational administration, and then did a PhD in economic and workforce development. Wrote my dissertation on the concept of social capital, which is something I've always been extremely interested in. Social capital, social mobility, and I think especially social capital is one of those things that are just becoming more and more important. And when people ask me what is social capital, I always say, I have an 8-year-old, and when he turns 15, I know I have 30 numbers in my cell phone that I can call and get him a summertime job. And not everybody has that, right? That's kind of the premise of this idea of social capital, and how do you, from a workforce standpoint, how you get that first work experience, right? And so anyway, it goes a lot deeper than that, but I always like to give that as kind of a surface level example. But Coastal is interesting. As you can see in our map, we are a very large, geographically spread out college. When I was recruited to come over and kind of take over economic and workforce development, I really did so because it was a merger. So I think 3.5 years ago, Coastal Alabama was 3 separate community colleges. Now, in industry and in business, we hear about mergers all the time, but you don't hear about them much in higher education yet. You will certainly in the next 20 years, and we'll kind of talk about why as we go through this. And so I really feel like this, and I say that, but we're not there yet. Merging 3 cultures, 3 locations. We serve the fastest growing county in the state and one of the fastest in the country down here in the coast. And we also serve some of the fastest shrinking rural areas in the state of Alabama at the same time. So having one institution, we say, is from pine trees to palm trees and really everything in between. As you can see on the map, our northernmost campus is in Gilbertown, Alabama, and it's 180 miles to get down to Gulf Shores, Alabama, where we have a culinary program, and really all those things in between. So it's kind of a unique model and a unique thing that is going to continue to happen, in my opinion. But obviously, when people think about labor, this is what people think about, right? I mean, this is, you don't have to go far, whether you live in Dothan or Montgomery or Baldwin County, to see these signs. And I've seen all of them, and I've just been particularly interested in looking for them. Of course, you got the ones at Burger King that says, sorry, we all quit, no hamburgers. And then, you've got the businesses that are talking about the people and saying, due to government handouts, no one wants to work anymore. I've heard that a lot, obviously, that we're paying people to stay home. There's certainly a notion out there. And then the one on the left bottom, you can't read the whole thing, but it says, apologies, we are short-staffed. And then it goes on to say, but also we were a terrible employer with no benefits who pays very poorly. And so, you got a lot of things happening from pay to, job quality to, us kind of going away from full-time permanent work. This gig economy was coming, but now it's coming faster. And so a lot of those things all kind of merge. And really, when you look at it, COVID didn't cause these things. I always say that this guy is COVID, and what he's done is he's put fuel on a smoldering fire and made it much, much bigger. And that's kind of what we're seeing in the labor market. So what we're really facing, I really like to talk about 3 separate things that are happening that are causing this severe shortage, and really make the case that we're going to be in this environment for a long time. And I call that environment kind of a sansdemic, which sans without demic people. And certainly we're seeing now, and everybody keeps saying, hey, when we get back to normal. And in my day-to-day, I sit in a lot of meetings with businesses, and I really cringe when they say, when we get back to normal, because there will be a new normal. We're not going back. You're not going to have access to labor like you did pre-COVID, and that's going to cause some fundamental changes. But so really, when you look at it, and I kind of, instead of just coming out with it, I like to call it a rising tide, pensions, and avocado toast. And really talking about, our workforce past, our workforce present, and then our workforce future. And really, when you talk about our workforce past, I always look at, I'm not a big unemployment guy. I don't care about unemployment numbers because I don't think it's a very good indicator of labor market. So, you know, in order to be unemployed, you have to be looking for a job. And so, you know, if I get laid off due to a pandemic, well, yeah, I'm gonna be counted as unemployed until I just stop looking. And we've certainly seen a lot of people, and you actually move from a category from unemployed to what the Department of Labor refers to as a discouraged worker, right? And so your labor participation can go down 5%, but your unemployment rate can be the same. Yet you may be missing, in our economy here in Southwest Alabama, it's about 8,000 people, right? When we got back to pre-pandemic unemployment rate. So same unemployment rate, 8,000 people short, just those 8,000 people stop looking for a job, right? I like labor participation, and this is something that has been sliding on us as a country. You know, it's not unique to Mobile, it's not unique to Birmingham, although this is a Southwest Alabama graph, and you can kind of see what happened. You know, labor participation, we were actually on a downward trend. I probably don't show that as well from 2016 because you got a little uptick there. And then you see COVID, and then we see this jump back, but then you see our graph continue to slide. And so that you can kind of see that COVID a blip on the screen, if you will, and then we recovered, yet we continue to decline. And that's been happening to us for a very long time. And it's really our baby boomers that are, you know, a big part of what's happening. And certainly that's a large generation of workers that really define and really drove our economy. I don't know if I got it in an upcoming slide or not, but I think the average boomer saw our GDP triple in their prime age earning years, right? In the middle of the baby boom, and you can start to see, you know, in the 70s and 80s, you had the more women than ever before in the workforce. You had the latchkey kid phenomenon, which everybody heard about, right? That was my generation, those kind of extra millennials that would go home and, you know, the key was under the floor mat, or in my case, the Virgin Mary that my Catholic Cajun parents had. And, you know, you went in the house and you fended for yourself because both of your parents were working. And really the first time in our economy that was a thing, you know, but you can kind of see that our baby boom caused a pretty big spike in population, and you can look where we've been ever since. And so it truly is the analogy that our boomers were the rising tide that lifted all boats. And unfortunately, and there you go, you know, there's participation rate, and you can see if you look, and I should have put these side by side, but with our baby boom, and then look when labor participation really starts to go to an all-time high, which was about 67% of working age adults. You know, you see that in 87 to 92 to 97. And that's a large part of just what I talked about, right? The dual income family, you know, both working hard, but of course we're kind of on the end of that, and that was coming, COVID or not. I've got a little thing that says read Empty Planet, and I'll tell you guys a little bit about that more in a second. But like the COVID fuel to the fire, you know, 2015 to 2019, you had about 2 million baby boomers retiring every year. In 2020, we saw 3.4 million retire, and it's estimated that in 2021, obviously we're, you know, almost to the end of that, we'll see well over 4 million. So COVID doubled the amount of annual retirements of our baby boomer generation. And the problem is we can't afford that. There's not enough bench strength to kind of step up and do that. And just look around organizations. You don't have to look far to see what I'm talking about. A secondary issue, and you know, maybe not an issue, but like I said, GDP tripled, you know, under our boomers' prime earning years. And so when you look at it, in the next 10 to 15 years, you're gonna have the largest wealth transfer in history. Okay, because the average boomer's worth like 1.2 million, which is again the wealthiest generation that we've ever had by far. And where will that wealth go? Right, that'll go to that next generation, and they, to be honest, they won't have to, maybe not have to hustle like their parents did, you know, because they're going to get, and of course, everybody knows that this is not, we've all got that specific story, right? Well, my parents aren't rich, or my parents are, but in general, we're going to see the largest wealth transfer in history. And again, there's that stat I kind of gave you before, that I always love to talk about. I don't know that we'll ever see that again with any generation, and you just look at, look at where the stock market was, where, boomer pensions were put in the 70s. And, we sitting here dancing at 36,000 point Dow. And that just shows you, kind of the opportunity that was put in front of them. And so the big question from that standpoint is, the millennials are coming, will the millennials fill their parents' shoes? And most people don't realize that the millennials have been here. And in 2016, they actually took over the US labor market as the largest generation. And we don't, poor Generation X, which is, I guess they would be, I'm kind of right in between. I guess they're going to be 42 to 55 right now, to 56 years old, if you will. But they're a relatively small generation, kind of sandwiched in between our boomers and our millennials. And so, but you can see that millennials have kind of taken over in 2016. And will they, and can they fill their parents' shoes? That's always the big question. And, you hear this all the time. And here's a Time magazine cover page from 2013. And it says, the me generation, millennials are lazy, entitled narcissists who still live with their parents, right? And of course, there's the young lady and she's taking a selfie. Okay, so 2013, lazy, entitled narcissist. And when I first saw this, I said, well, let me go find some other quotes about millennials. And so I found this one that's very interesting. It says, there they are, those preening narcissists who have to document every banal moment with their cutting edge communication technology. And I thought, oh, wow. And then I realized that was actually in Newsweek in 1985. Okay, the technology they were referring to was this, right? How many of you guys remember beepers and camcorders? I do. I don't even think my beeper was ever connected, but I certainly had one and wore it on my hip. And then I found another one, privileged, narcissistic, entitled, spoiled, and promiscuous. And looking into that was out of Life magazine in 1968. So that would be today's baby boomer, but back then we called them hippies. So my point is that we do a lot of complaining about the next generation of workforce and whether they have the aptitude and the ability to fill the generation behind them shoes. And in reality, and we talk about it all the time today, kids on their phones, kids on their computers, kids on their technologies, they're lazy, they don't want to work. You hear it all the time. But our work ethic as a country has not changed as much as we think. One of the things that has not changed is our opinions about the next generation of workforce, as you can see here, right? So that's kind of workforce past. We know we've got our boomers retiring at a rapid rate. We know we need to hang on to them. And there's actually a lot of people talking about strategies on how to get them back into the workforce and use that worker. Because again, we're kind of getting there where it's really, really tight. When you look at the present, we'll talk about a couple of things. The first is where all the dudes, and this is really a trend that we've seen since 2008, and everybody knows 2008-9. The Great Recession. Of course, where are all the ladies since March 2020? We've lost about 2.5 million women, and that the answer is obvious: is childcare in the midst of this pandemic and schools shutting down and so on and so forth. And then ultimately, as we talk about labor participation, it does seem like in this country, well, and it doesn't seem like it, the data shows it, that every time we have a economic disruption, whether it's a pandemic, in my part of the world, if it's a hurricane, if it's an oil spill, whenever we recover, we don't recover to the level of workforce participation that we were pre-pandemic or pre-hurricane. And that's certainly going to hold true as we reemerge, or if we reemerge from COVID, right? So I call it taking the field with less players after every economic disruption. I describe it as, everybody in the South likes football, right? And you start your game with 22 players and it's like, okay, timeout, and you get back on the field with 20. Okay, timeout or halftime, you're getting back on the field with 18. And that really, what happens. Again, the health pandemic, natural disasters, so on and so forth. So the one that really scares me the most, and something that I always look as I look around our campus, especially, or our campuses, is the remarkable erosion of the male prime age workforce. And there's certainly not to ignore the really sharp and sudden exit of all the women due to childcare. But since 2008, which is 13 years now, we've been losing men in a rapid rate. And when you think about it, what industries were hurt most in the 2008 and 9 recession? Construction, manufacturing, right? These are male dominated occupations. So what did they do? We'll talk about that in a second. But when you look at it, this is from 1980 to 2019. So even before, the recession, this was starting to become an issue. 94% to 89%. It may not seem like a lot, but that represents about 8 million men in our workforce. Okay. And you can kind of see that chart, and it's self-explanatory. So, what's happening to them? And again, the recession sidelined a lot of our men. You can see there in the chart on the left is really the how many men participate in part-time work versus full-time work. And you saw a lot of that in the recession, right? Out of that full-time benefits earning manufacturing job, maybe into the service sector, right? Back in 08 and 09. And now we're kind of seeing the opposite. We're seeing a mass exodus in the service sector, getting back into other jobs, but we never really recovered from that. Again, looking at prime age working men. And of course, I think that's a state chart, or that's a United States chart on labor participation. And you can see, kind of what I'm talking about, that this has been a long brewing issue here since 2006 overall, just a continual decline there. So, what are they doing? Probably the most fascinating statistic, and I live and breathe stats and data. But in 2014, for the first time since 1880, more men aged 25 to 34 live with their parents rather than a spouse. And you can see I like Time magazine covers to show in my presentations. Headline there is they just won't grow up. Meet the Twixters, young adults who live off their parents, bounce from job to job, and hop from mate to mate. I talked about earlier, the average, the wealth of the boomer. And so we don't need to wait until they pass on those earnings. It's happening now because they've built big houses. They got plenty of money to put food on the table. They've got an extra basement, right, for that 23-year-old that wants to spend a lot of time in that basement playing video games. So that boomer wealth is even translating now with almost a my wife actually came to one of my presentations talking about this, and she says, there's a Matthew McConaughey movie about this. It's called Failure to Launch. And I'm like, of course there's a Matthew McConaughey movie about this, right? I mean, whatever. But, the average, we looking at the average age of marriage, sliding. And when I'm talking about sliding, I'm talking about from, 30 years ago being 24, 25 to now being 31, 32. That's huge because, and so with marriage, fatherhood for the men, and then of course the need to have a full-time benefits earning career, right? I mean, you may not be as concerned about, healthcare coverage in a job until you start bringing those little ones in the world, then you do, right? So, we've got a couple reasons for that. Men by far are disproportionately affected by our opioid crisis. And we've seen, again, sale of opioids quadruple in the last 20 years for sure. You can see one of those stats by 2019, estimated 9.7 million Americans misused prescriptions. And we've actually done some work on this in Alabama. I was on a task force that explored this, and we figured that there's about 60,000 people that we could add to the workforce in the state of Alabama, a small state, if the opioid crisis was non-existent. And that's not just people hooked on opioids, but it's people that are taking care of people that are facing opioid addictions, right? Like, I miss work because I can't, because I got to go take care of a sibling or a child. Well, I missed work again. And, still the number one cause of termination. I know it's true in my area. I would assume it's true for the rest of the state, is obviously no call, no show, right? I mean, that's kind of where we're at. And then, of course, I kind of missed that slide in this presentation, but I've got an excellent stat that shows really 2 years ago, pre-pandemic, on the male thing, the numbers almost match from the reduction in hours that the average 25 to 34-year-old male is working, and the increase in time spent on video games, and not just video games, computer games, wasting time away looking at the screen, right? And it's really, really scary. So, you really do. I mean, I kind of wrap it all up into this category of delayed adulthood. And even if they get to doing what they need to do by 32, 33 years old, they've missed the economic productivity that their boomer parents were given at 23, 24, 25, right? Which is huge for our economy. And the last thing I'll talk about is really living below 2.1, which is this is what's going to create the problems for us for the next 20 years, is that our baby boom is now a baby bust. And I always tell people, I actually just reread it over the Thanksgiving break, but the most influential book I've read out of hundreds of economic development books and workforce development books and business books is a book called Empty Planet. And it came out in 2018 before the pandemic. And that's really where I get a lot of this information. But as you can see, here's our population growth by decade. And for those people who think that the earth, we're going to put so many people on the earth that it's just going to kind of explode. I mean, the data shows a very different trend. So I always call this, what do workforce and fertility have in common? All you got to do is look at these two charts. And in 1990, and this is primarily your boomers' big years, their big earning years. On the left, you can kind of see that's our population pyramid. So you can see our workers were supporting a much smaller population at the top of their pyramid. The problem is our pyramid's turned into a balloon. And you don't have to be an economist to look side by side at those two charts and realize where we're heading. We really, back in 1990, now, 30 years ago now, it was pretty ideal youth heavy population. And again, into this kind of middle-aged balloon. And I'll give you guys a teaser. I will ask a question since Zoom seems to be working well, but there's a country that is even more so into their balloon than we are, and really are going to face some significant problems keeping their economy afloat by 2050. And so think about that. I think I got a slide that asks that question. And there it is on cue. But just to show this, the average age when a high school graduating class will start to shrink. And that is right around the corner in 26. Okay. Because again, we've been below 2.1, again, 2.1 children for every, man and woman, what it takes to make those children, right, is just not enough to sustain. There are really only 2 states that have that replacement rate, and we'll get that in a second. But could you guys guess any country who's already suffering due to this exact same thing?
I don't know.
I'll go ahead and click it, but it's Japan. And so, the average age of a Japanese person now, I think, is over 50. And so they're going to face some pretty significant challenges. And we only have 2 states in this country that are above replacement rate, which means that people in the state are having enough children to fill their void for. And those states are South Dakota. Now, that's almost not even a real answer, because by population, South Dakota is 18% of Alabama. Okay. So they only got like 813,000 people. And then the second one, you guys will be like, oh yeah, of course, it's Utah, right? Those Mormons have some children. And my wife and I actually went to Zion on vacation for our anniversary in August. And I saw the houses were big. And then every time we went to a restaurant, it's true. Every family got 4 or 5 kids running around. It's like, oh God. And that was just when we were really starting to study some of this stuff. But that's not the case anywhere else you go. I have 2 children. I got a lot of friends who have 1. I know a lot of people are saying we don't want to do that, and there's a lot of reasons for that. You look at first, economic uncertainty. is an issue. You know, people tend to not have as many children due to economic uncertainty. Decline of marriage in you know, our country and everywhere else around the world. Married people have more children, and less people are getting married. Secularism is an issue as well. People who identify with a certain religion tend to have more kids, and we've seen a decline in that kind of stuff as well. So of course, we don't think that's that far away, but when you look at the difference between 1990, which probably everybody either with me now or watching this video can remember, right? You were listening to New Kids on the Block, you had your beeper, you had your camcorder, you were doing all those things. That doesn't seem like that far away. Well, fast forward, we're in 2022, right? Or about to be 2022. So when we talk about this, I was like, well, that's kids being born today. Well, look, 18 years, 20 years, that's your entry-level workforce. And we're just not seeing them. And everything shows that as it gets more expensive, you know, the average cost of raising a kid now is $234,000 a child to get them to 19 years old, right? So, you know, those are some things that are kind of really scary. And I kind of wrap up with this, you know, how can we survive this? The reality is we can't. You know, that this is kind of the way our population, our economy is going to trend. From a workforce standpoint, we've really got to prepare ourselves for a workforce and an educational recruiting landscape like we've you know, never known before. We're going to have to recruit beyond traditional demographics, and we're really going to have to value people more. It's going to be a human capital economy for a very, very long time, and we're already seeing it. You know, and an article I wrote that I'm happy to kind of share with the group, or it's actually not finished, it's prepared to go out in January, but for about 20 years there, we over-credentialed. And think about that, right? It was not uncommon, and it's still not uncommon, to roll into Starbucks and have your barista have a bachelor's degree. It's not uncommon, or it has not been uncommon for the guy come and install your cable to have a bachelor's degree, right? Companies listed those really enhanced credentials because they could get them. And what are we seeing now, right? We're seeing the complete opposite trend as COVID has really tightened up this labor market. Employers, you know, really diminishing those skills, right? And really looking more towards that skill rather than any kind of degree per se. They're looking at aligned skills. You know, people that have had experience in different industries, and starting to kind of catch on to that. I think skills-based hiring is really going to be kind of the next iteration from an HR perspective. And we've got some HR folks on the call, you know, to look at, really get down to the skill level. And we're going to have to respond as institutions to make sure that we are identifying the skills taught. It won't just be, hey, I took this class. Okay, what did you learn? What skills can you do? And so there's a lot of initiatives out there trying to clear that up. But, you know, at the end of the day, it really will. It is going to be a human capital economy. And that's one thing that I teach one class here at the college beyond my administrative duties, and it's personal finance. And I tell my students that all the time. I was like, if you're willing to get up and get after it and go to work, you're going to have opportunity. If you're willing to learn, you're going to have more opportunity, because people are going to have you. So that's kind of a little bit about just some of my research. And certainly I know when we introduced, we said we talk about what I'm doing, and I'm certainly will pause there, and we can ask those questions. I'll tell you about some of the things that we do to try to meet some of these challenges. But I'll go ahead and end there, and certainly happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, there were stats in there, even with being an HR person for almost 30 years, that I had not really even latched onto, with the decline in men in the workforce since 2008. That one's not one that I've even seen before, particularly. So you know, part of my question is exactly that. You know, what do we do in the non-standard? I know we're looking at, I think vocational schools and trade schools, and the fact that we haven't promoted that has been problematic, and that we need to continue to move that way to define skills that are needed. But what are you doing, and what is it that you see going forward for employers to fix some of this?
Yeah, I guess the first part of my answer to that is, you know, the concept of trade school and vocational school, we've still got a stigma with that in this country. We've got a stigma with community colleges. I learned that very quickly in my first few months of experience here, especially after having been at a 4-year institution. And we've got to get rid of that, because I can show you with data all day long why the ROI on a industrial maintenance degree from us can compete long-term, or at least for the first 20 years with medical school. I mean, I can show you that data all day long, because our chemical plants in Southwest Alabama, you may be making 100 grand by the time you're 25 years old, right? And thinking about getting out of medical school in that time. So we got to get to a place where school is school. If you want to be a doctor, you go to school. If you want to be a lawyer, you go to school. If you want to be a construction superintendent, you go to school. I think, our vernacular for young people, we kind of got this negative connotation that it's something lesser. And we've got to fix that, and we've got to bring, I know a real good friend of mine's, grew up in Pittsburgh and he's been down here working in steel industry. He's been a steel guy all his life and as a supervisor. And I know he said in his melt shop, he'd always put the sign, here lies the professionals, and so we've got to treat some of these things with the same respect that we treat other occupations. I think higher ed's going to have to prove its value. Certainly there's been no inflation number bigger than the cost of an education over the last 20 years. Another reason why I like being at the 2-year college is truly affordable, because we've got a lot of people out there with $50,000 in loan debt that have a $30,000 a year job. And, as an economist, that doesn't, and you don't have to be an economist to know that doesn't make any dang sense. We've got to get teenage employment back. I thought a lot about this when there was a big congressional push to the $15 an hour, because I'm thinking, like, what about that teenager that works at the ice cream shop? Like, is there really that much skill involved in taking ice cream and putting it in a cone? No. Right. And if we start paying that person that much money, then how much is my ice cream cone going to cost? I feel like it costs as much in downtown Fairhope anyway. But my point is that used to be it wasn't a choice whether you got a show, and now it's a rarity. And so we're not having work experiences early enough. And we need to get back to that. And that lies with a lot of parents, in my opinion. You really got to get kids out there and get them to experience what work looks like. Unfortunately, if there's one thing that COVID has really put a damper on, is internships, is job shadowing things, because let's face it, a lot of our employers are just limiting, the people that they can have on site, especially I do a lot of work with our manufacturers, right? That's not a work from home thing, right? You're making things, and we know we need to make things as a country to survive economically. But we got to expose young people to that kind of stuff. I always say that it's like, how do we expect young people to know about manufacturing jobs? They go to restaurants, they go to hotels, they go to all kind of different things, but how many of them get the experience to go look and see how steel is made, or the chemicals that help us in our everyday life? One of the things we make here in Southwest Alabama, if y'all remember back in the 80s, you remember your car dashes would crack. How many of you guys saw a car dash with the foam kind of coming out of it, right? And those holes in it, right? But, we actually make the product here that is the reason you don't see that anymore. And so, but how are you supposed to know that? So it really is an educational piece. We really do have to get back to, again, a very basic skill level. I can tell you, every time I give a presentation on workforce development to a group of parents, it never fails, and it never fails to just about drive me insane. A parent comes up to me and says, "That's great, those apprenticeship programs you got going for those kids." And I pick up on it right away now because it's been said to me so many times, those kids. So what that parent is telling me is that it's okay for those kids. And in their mind, that's lesser than my kid. And in my mind, I want to say, oh, those apprentices that are finishing an apprenticeship at 20 at a salary of 65 grand with a clear path towards 6 figures in the next 3 to 5 years. Oh, those kids. And so we've really got some perceptions out there that we've got to fix, with young people. You got to get them involved early. You can't get them away and out. Like we talked about, labor participation is sliding, and it is really, really, really difficult. And I'll say this is probably incorrect to say, but to kind of get people back off the couch. Right. And then we use that when we talk about those people who are non-participants. Okay, how do we go get them off the couch? I'm not saying that they are, literally laying on their couch eating chips all day. It's not what I'm saying, but it's very difficult. And so to me, and a lot of our focus here is on how do we create opportunities for that emerging workforce, which is that workforce that's kind of coming up through the ranks. That is the path of least resistance in my work and in my area. So, apprenticeship programs, again, trying to get back cooperative, work experiences, all those different types of things. Career pathing has been a huge thing. And that's more on the employer side. But I think that, you're not gonna, the days of just saying, hey, Joe, come to work here. Here's your hourly rate. And you're going to do that for the foreseeable future. That's gone. We know, again, this new generation likes advancement. That's what I love about apprenticeship programs. We lay that out from the beginning. You learn these skills on the job and in the classroom, you earn more money, right? You earn, you learn, you progress. And whether you do that through apprenticeship or not, I think that's something that employers you will see winning the day over the next several years. They're going to lay that out for folks. And that's what I always say, not every employee is going to make it to the top of the career ladder, but you better be thinking about showing them the way. Right. And I think that stuff's going to be super important. So anyway, that's maybe some random thoughts in that question, but hopefully it answers it.
Yeah, I think it's great. And I probably could sit here and ask you a dozen more different things that come to mind about the employers who are caught in a situation where they can't. So it's your manufacturing people, or for our company, we're moving in storage, and habitually you're retaining people who are in a lower level of skills, and that's not going to change. So when you talk about apprenticeships and career paths and stuff, those are the people we need. We need the people who are moving the furniture from point A to point B every day, over and over again. And you need the people who are on your manufacturing line. Henry Ford had it down. You're going to do the same task every day because that's the task that has to be completed. How do you manage that from an employer side when you've got all of these people wanting to be something more? You can't.
Yeah, and I think, we've certainly gotten there, and COVID is exacerbating that too. But, especially you come in on kind of repetitive menial tasks, we're gonna need automation. And in fact, I was in Dothan a few years ago talking about workforce innovation, and some guy came up to me and he said, "Okay, smart doctor," he said, when are the robots come and take over our jobs?" And it was just hilarious. I just kind of laughed about it. But, fast forward today, we need automation now more than we ever have, and we will continue into the future. I do walk into manufacturing facilities every now and then, and I see people separating widgets by hand, and I look at that and saying that has no place in the economy. So we're going to have to invest in automation. Before COVID, when I would kind of do some economics, there's a formula that I look at called the automation index, and it's an algorithm that takes in several factors. Likelihood of that job being automated or being a thing in the next several years. And it usually has to do with the task, right? Is it something that can be automated? Is it just repetitive, menial, manual task? And when I would pull that in my region 2 years ago, it was production operations, right? Those things on the manufacturing floor that could possibly get automated. Now it's food and accommodation service. And you've actually, I don't know if you guys have seen this yet, but the first Taco Bell concept's already in California that has 3 employees. So you go through, you order yourself, you put your credit card in, and you drive underneath it, and it's like at the bank. The old tube socks at the bank? Well, instead of having the tube that you put your money in, there comes your burrito or your taco, and 3 people run the whole store. So we're going to see automation, and people have been scared of automation, but the reality is that we're going to need it, and most likely, it still will not fill the people gap that we have coming. And so my advice always don't be scared of it. Look at your task across the board as you're doing those job task analysis and all those different types of things, and say, is this is this something we actually need a person for?
Good advice. Great advice. So
Yeah.
thank you very much. Bill, any thoughts or comments before we let Josh go?
Well, I was wondering if immigration is going to have any impact on the numbers regarding the data he is using. And also, since in Dothan, Sony was one of the larger employers for probably 30 years. And they went through the different media that was being automated. I wonder if we have any products coming online that are going to be able to sustain a manufacturing company.
Well, I'll tackle that first question, Bill. So I think we will need. I mean, we're already seeing a need for immigration, and however you need to contextualize it, whether it's jobs Americans will or will not do, we know we need that. And so I told you guys I grew up in South Louisiana, and so after Hurricane Ida, I was going home to help my parents, and literally you could go in the town I grew up in, and when you got there, you roll down the windows, and all you hear is Latino music and roofing guns, right? I mean, there was not American on a rooftop. I don't mean that in a negative way. I'm a data guy. I always look at it from a very objective standpoint. But I think we're going to have to figure that out. We're already relying on immigration to fill a lot of the jobs that we have in construction, in agriculture. And at some point, we're going to kind of have to figure that out. And really, that's one of the things that I think Canada has gotten right. They've not been as hesitant for immigrants, even refugees. And I think they're probably a strong, of course, this is not an economy like the US, but, I think there would be a lot less if I think one in 5 Canadians weren't born there, right? And that's a little different than the US. But I think the point is they have done a little bit more successfully, and it turns into a big political issue for us. But we got to figure out a way to have people to want to come here, because if you look at the economics reports that come out, we keep adding jobs. We keep adding jobs in this economy, and of course we're shrinking with the people to fill them. So I think we're going to have to figure out immigration.
My question isn't a pro or con immigration. It's the way the numbers are going to filter in across the board of some of the data that you were sharing with us earlier.
So repeat that, Bill. Sorry, I'm not.
It's not an issue with me of pro or con immigration. I'm just wondering how the numbers are going to affect the populations in different states as it relates to the workforce.
Yeah, and I don't know that data. I can tell you. I mean, obviously, you see immigration happen in states where it's a little easier to set up shop for our immigrants, right? You've seen a lot in California, a lot in Texas. I can tell you that this one of the data points that I do know well is that the data I shared specifically with the demographic drought is not just an American thing. It's an African thing. And, the rise of the education level, as the lights come on in Africa, you're going to see less people. The same thing in South America, the same thing in India, where they're educating, record numbers of women that are pursuing careers. So I know that didn't totally answer your question. I don't know the data on kind of how they're dispersing out, but I can tell you the demographic issues are not just United States issues, and maybe for a different reason. But again, they're starting to happen. I think you'll find, in 40, if we were having this conversation in 30 or 40 years, maybe even sooner than that, and we look at China, they're going to say that their one-child policy was the most disastrous economic policy ever. And why in the world would we ever do that, right? And so, this really is a worldwide issue, just as far as the number of people. But to answer your question about disbursement, I honestly don't know the direct answer to that.
Just curious.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Well, Josh, I appreciate your time.
Sure.
I'm going to be excited to share this with some people at work as well. So I think there's a lot of good information that we can use, and may reach out at some point and ask you some questions if I can.
Sure, it's
But,
my favorite thing to talk about. So
yeah. There you go. But thank you very much. Appreciate it. Great information and certainly engaging. And I think with that, we're at time. I'm going to do the 4-way test real quick and we will sign off and look forward to seeing everybody. Hope everybody has a very Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. Next meeting for us will be January 13th. So we'll skip 2 weeks from now. And I really look forward to seeing everybody. And Josh, if you're ever interested in joining us again, then please let us know. With that, I'm going to do the 4-way test of the things we think, say, or do. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Thank you. And I hope everybody has a fantastic holiday. It's good seeing you. Bye. Thank you, Josh.
Thanks, Josh.
see you guys.
Bye.